Okay, so I'm going to build up the Atari Punk console kit, which is a kit I have on my shop, and it's a cute little noisemaker. Just to give you an idea, so this is what it will look like and sound like once it's built up. So it's a fairly simple circuit. It's a cool little project. It's quite good, I think, early soldering project. It's not There aren't too many components, and they're all fairly straightforward. And it's fun, makes a nice sound, and it's kind of a good introduction to synths. So, um, inside the kit, you'll find like everything you need to make the Punk console. The only things you'll need to add are soldering iron. So I recommend the Hackle FX888D, which is like the current one. Um, a little bit hard to get hold of, and the ones on eBay I find are generally fake. So there is a supplier in the UK, and then in the US I think you can get them from like Adafruit and stuff. But obviously you make sure you get the correct voltage version, and you also need some solder. I'm using leaded solder because I find it a bit easier to work with, although it's getting less and less common. And obviously, you know, there are kind of health concerns about lead. This is 0.6 millimeter solder, and if you need to know where to get this, just leave a comment, and I'll maybe add some links on where to get these things. So inside the kit, everything else you need is there. So everything is pre-cut and pre-trimmed. So all you need is the soldering iron and the solder. So this is the component bag, and in here are all of the little bits we're going to need to solder on. So just get that open. So here we have all the components that we're going to use, and they are all labelled on the board as well, so it's fairly easy to match the component to the board. But basically you have this component is labelled 103, and that's the 0.01 microfarad capacitor, which goes up here where it says 0.01. This is labelled 104, and that goes where it's labelled 0.1 microfarad. And then these are the two integrated circuits, and this is the electrolytic capacitor, which goes on the output. And these are the resistors, so the variable resistors and the 1K resistor. So it's up to you, kind of how you go about this, and you know, if you've done soldering before, that's probably all the information you need, really. But I'm going to go through and I'm going to build up the board anyway on the video, just in case you're feeling like, you know, you want to see exactly how it's done. This is not an introduction to soldering. I'll give some kind of tips as I go, but there are some great intro videos on YouTube, which I will also link through. But yeah, okay, anyway, let's go. So I tend to just plonk all the components in and then soldering everything up. So I just plonk them through and then just make sure that they kind of stick in. I'll just bend the legs a little bit. And you have to forgive me, I'm doing this kind of under the video, so I'll probably screw things up. It's a little bit more difficult than doing it just straight on. Okay, so the capacitors, doesn't matter which way they go round. This one is the 103 capacitor, and this is the 104. The electrolytic, it does matter which way it's go around, and you see there's a minus marking on one side, and that indicates the side that is negative. So there's a little plus on the board, and you should put the non-negative side, the plus side to the plus, and the minus side to the minus, like that. Okay. Similarly, the variable resistors don't have any polarity. Yeah, and you can just give the legs a little bend so it stays in. That's what I do. And it's up to you. You can either like put the components in and solder them in one by one, or you can like just push all the components through like I'm doing and do it all at once. And the resistor also, there's no polarity. I tend to bend the legs first to get it kind of more or less right. And push it through. Just make sure it kind of stays in. And then the two integrated circuits there are two 555s on this board, and it does matter which way these goes in. So you see there's a little tab on one end and there's a tab marking on the board here. So you need to get those to line up. You may need to bend the IC a little bit to get it to go in, but all of the holes and all of the tabs on this board, like the bits that you solder to, have been made a little bit bigger just to make everything quite easy. So it's designed to be an easy to solder kind of project. Okay, that's everything kind of pushed through, so we can kind of start soldering. If you have helping hands or a vise, that's perfect. But I'm not going to use that. So I use a tip, which is like a chisel tip, and I tend to find that helps with soldering. Just lets you apply heat a bit more easily to the board. With soldering, it's best to apply heat to the pad and the part, and then feed solder in on the opposite side. And I'm just going to do. I'm just going to get it soldered through. I would generally hold this up, but doing it on the video is a bit trickier. But I'm just going to do like a few of the pads at first. So getting this for the variable resistors, you'll need quite a lot of solder. So just feed it through from the other side. Yeah. And make sure everything is properly pushed through, so it's not kind of hanging off. So I tend to do just one leg to begin with, and then make sure that actually everything is still kind of pushed through properly. That's my technique anyway. And my eyesight being as it is, I would probably hold it up a bit to my eyes when I'm actually doing it. And then there's one pin on this one to do. Okay, so I've soldered through. Oh, I haven't done that variable resistor. So I soldered one pin on everything through, and I'm just going to do, so you can see I've screwed up that resistor, so it fell out when I was soldering it in. So I'm just going to push it through. Okay, so everything is now kind of held firmly in place, so nothing's going to fall out. Yeah, I think that looks okay, and I'm going to, everything is properly pushed through, and I'm now going to solder up the rest of the pins. And as I finish a component, I think I'm going to start chopping off the legs so I can get access to things more easily. So I'm using, these are my favourite wire cutters. These are Hosan N34s. Thing about wire cutters, it's quite nice to get ones that are flat. They have a flat edge, yeah. So that's ideal. But really, the cheap wire cutters you get at a dollar store will be fine too. Yeah, nice tools are kind of fun to work with. So if you can afford it, I recommend it. Oops. It's kind of hard soldering under the camera, so you have to excuse my screw-ups, but I think it's of passable quality, so it should all work. So now it's just the variable resistors and the 555s to go. So for the variable resistors, you want to make sure you're at least covering the whole of the pad and the solder wheel. Solder will flow across the whole pad, so it will fill in the little hole, the little gap that's there. I think ideally I would be wanting to put a little bit more solder on these, but you know, under the camera and everything it's kind of awkward. Okay, so now just the 555s, and we can go through each of the pins. Just there we go. Oops, let's turn this around to make it a bit easier perhaps. You can also get these little clamps for holding PCBs, which can make assembly kind of easier. But yeah, I don't tend to. I tend to just kind of hold it. It all works in the end. Okay, so that's all. Those are all of the main kind of components, and next you'll need to add the battery clip and the speaker. So that's all we've got left, and we've got some tape also included to hold those in place. Once you've done that, I recommend just kind of going and do a quick inspection of all of your solder joints, make sure you're happy with everything. You can just go through, and if you have something that you think, oh, that looks a bit dodgy, just reflow it. So just touch the soldering iron to it. You're looking for kind of a nice fillet, ideally. So you want to make sure there's definitely no gaps. Everything is soldered around the lead properly, and yeah, there's that nice little fillet just there. Okay, so let's do the battery connector first. The connectors have been pre-trimmed to the right lengths, but they haven't been tinned. If you want, you can tin the cables if you find that makes your life easier, but it's not entirely necessary. Yeah, so just poke them through the holes. That's my recommendation. So the red wire goes to the plus, and it's labelled on the board again. So you just poke it through, and then I just bend it over. Poke it through, bend it over, and solder that. Oops. Let's see. Yeah. Okay. Okay, and just solder it in place, and then they're fairly short anyway, but I just give them a little trim, clean it off. Doesn't really matter, but you don't want like little stray bits of wire going anywhere and screwing up the circuit. So yeah, there we go. So that's the power connector. And next up is the speaker. So one thing you can do, which I haven't done on this wire, is you can kind of just twist it together, so you get slightly keeps the cables a bit neater, but that's entirely optional. So everything on this board is hopefully nice and well spaced out. I tried to space out the pads so that there's not much chance of you accidentally like bridging pins. The only place you might do that is on the ICs. That's also something to check for as you build this up. Make sure there's no little blobs, little balls in particular of solder can be a problem. So if a solder is balled up and is sat between a pin, that will screw up the circuit and cause an issue. Okay, just trim those off. And then we're going to solder on the speaker. And this is a little bit tricky actually. So to do this, you're just going to solder the wires to the pads. Some of them have plus and minus labelled on them, but it's not particularly critical which way it goes around. So you can just, what I would do, and there's a little bit of wax covering the pad which kind of protects it. So what I'm going to do is I tend to flow a little bit of solder, my own solder, onto the pads. They're pre-primed with a little bit of solder, but depending on whether you're using leaded or unleaded, could be a little bit hard to solder to. So I add a little bit of my own. By the way, I'm using a temperature of 350 on this soldering iron, which I tend to find is a good temperature for general soldering. So then I just touch it, make sure it's flowed, make sure the heat has properly, everything is properly heated up, and I just let it flow around the part, and you're holding it in place until it's properly got solid. Okay. And then same here, just going to flow it around, make sure it flows around everything. Okay. That looks good. Okay. So hopefully that's going to work. So the next step is to stick a battery on it. We know this battery works. So I'm just going to grab this battery off this other one. So just taking off the double-sided tape because it's a bit messy. Okay. There we go. So that's all working. The variable resistors come in two parts, so you have to add on the little knobs. And then there we go. You can play around to your heart's content. Okay, so the next step is to stick the double-sided tape on. You can do this however you want, but I tend to stick the battery underneath, and then I tape. So it has a little bit of tape on it already, so oops, just tie that up. Should have used. I've run out of batteries. I've been building so many of these that I've run out of batteries, so I had to reuse one. And I didn't take the mask off. There we go. And there we go. There's the completed project. So this is the first kit that I've put out. So your thoughts are most welcome. I will probably be designing more kits and releasing them in the shop, and hopefully things that build onto the Punk console as well. So yeah, please send your thoughts and comments, and I hope you have a successful build. Thank you very much.